Rolex is unarguably the world's most prestigious and well-known luxury watch brand in the world. Associated with success and prestige, Rolex has a more than century of innovation, craftsmanship, and pushing the boundaries of making reliable, durable, and long-lasting luxury timepieces. It's also often the most misunderstood. With all the chatter surrounding this legendary timekeeping company, there are aspects of their heritage that don't get talked enough. Hello brewers! In today's video, we will be looking at 20 things you probably didn't know about the most well-known watch brand in the world, Rolex. Here are 20 things you didn't know about Rolex. Number 20. There are more fake Rolexes than real. According to the Federation of the Swiss Watch Industry, the production of counterfeit watches is more prolific than the production of genuine luxury watches. Over 7 million fake models are sold every year. Number 19. Rolex has a little sister, the Tudor brand. In 1946, Rolex founder HansWilsdorf announced the birth of the brand's little sister, Tudor. These watches pride themselves on having the same quality as Rolex watches but for a more affordable price point. However, the most expensive model, according to the Barnaby's database, flew for $379,500 in 2015 at Philips. Number 18. The Rolex Submariner is the first watch waterproof to 100 meters. Created in 1953 for fans of scuba diving, an activity still in its infancy in the 1950s, the Rolex Submariner is the very first watch waterproof to 100 meters, about 320 feet. Proposed the essential accessory for divers, it also becomes a symbol of action and appears many times in the films of the James Bond saga. Sean Connery wears the model reference 6538 in his first 4 films, while Roger Moore sports the 5513 in 2 films. Number 17. The most expensive Rolex is $17.7 million. Paul Newman's Rolex Daytona was auctioned off in October 2017 in New York by Philips for an incredible sum of $17.7 million. The piece was acquired by an anonymous bidder after 12 minutes. It became the most expensive collector's watch in the world, all brands combined, before being dethroned in 2019 by a Patek Philippe watch that sold for $31.1 million. Number 16. All Rolex watches are assembled by hand. Even if the annual production is estimated at nearly 1 million watches, Rolex claims that the assembly and adjustment of all of its timepieces is entirely done by hand. Around 4,000 highly qualified operators and watchmakers are involved in designing the models, in more than 100 different countries. Rolex also requires all of its watches to be chronometer certified. To earn this title, a movement must face 15 days of ruthless testing by the Swiss Official Chronometer Control, the COSC. Number 15. Rolex wasn't always called Rolex. Even though Rolex has become a household name all across the world, they didn't start out under that brand. The original company was named Wilsdorf and Davis after its founders Hans Wilsdorf and Alfred Davis. Born in Germany and orphaned when he was young, Wilsdorf spent his years working for La Chose de France, a Swiss watch manufacturer. After learning valuable skills in Switzerland, in 1905, he decided to move to London to start his own. At only 24 years old, Wilsdorf met his investor and partner Davis, and they set up Wilsdorf and Davis. With Wilsdorf's knowledge/passion for watchmaking combined with Davis' experience in financing and international trade, they established the company that still exists over 100 years later and is loved by watch fans all over the world. Number 14. Rolex created the first ever waterproof watch. In 1926, Rolex invented the first ever waterproof wristwatch, aptly named Oyster. This hermetically sealed case provided the perfect protection for the precious timekeeping movements locked inside. Before then, wristwatches ran the risk of getting water or dust inside. The Oyster solved this problem and other companies soon followed suit. Number 13. The name means nothing. The name Rolex was invented from scratch, as confirmed by Wilsdorf in 1946. According to the brand's website, this name was chosen because it is easy to pronounce in all European languages, and that it is short enough to be easily included on the dial of a watch. Wilsdorf said with humor, "I tried to combine the letters of the alphabet in every possible way. A few hundred names emerged, but none of them really satisfied me. One morning, when I was on the upper deck of a horse-drawn omnibus traveling along Cheapside, in London, a genius whispered Rolex to my ear." Number 12. Rolex is a Swiss brand born in London. The history of Rolex begins in London when, in 1905, a young German, HansWilsdorf, founded a company specializing in watches equipped with small movements made by a Swiss manufacturer in Biel with his brother-in-law Alfred Davis. The shop only moved to Switzerland in 1919, after the British government introduced a 33% tax on all imported products to finance the debts from World War I. Number 11. Rolex can endure some tough climates. Rolex watches survived Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay's expedition up Mount Everest back in 1953. They never lost a second. The watch given to Hillary was never purchased commercially. Rolex was one of the sponsors of the 1953 trip that year, and part of this included providing Hillary with this watch to wear during the climb and then to return to Rolex for extensive testing after the descent. Wilsdorf even had a Rolex specially made called the Deep DEA, which was attached to a vessel and sent to the bottom of the Mariana Trench in the North Pacific Ocean, the deepest spot above the Earth's crust, by the U.S. Navy. Even during descent and extreme pressure, the watch, which was attached to the side, maintained time. Number 10. Rolex is a charity. Rolex is currently owned by the HansWilsdorf Foundation, which finds the largest scholarship endowment in Europe. Rolex is not owned by an individual, and so the trustees of the foundation oversee how profits are distributed. According to Swiss law, the brand is not obligated to declare whether anyone has ever received a donation from them. They also receive major tax cuts due to being a charity. Number 9. Rolex has a long-term partnership with Wimbledon. The partnership between Rolex and tennis dates back to 1978, when Rolex became official timekeeper of the championships, Wimbledon. This marked the beginning of a privileged association between two partners driven by the pursuit of excellence. The brand now pays tennis legend Roger Federer an incredible £11,500,000 a year for his endorsement. Number 8. The day wheel of the Rolex Day Date is available in 26 languages. The languages are English, German, Arabic, Chinese, Danish, Spanish, Basque, Catalan, Ethiopian, Finnish, French, Greek, Hebrew, Dutch, Indonesian, Italian, Japanese, Latin, Moroccan, Norwegian, Farsi, Polish, Portuguese, Russian, Swedish and Turkish. Number 7. Rolex patented the self-winding mechanism, Perpetual Rotor, in 1931. When released, the Perpetual Rotor was revolutionary. This technology is a semicircular plate that relies on gravity to move freely. The Perpetual Rotor was the first wristwatch to use a 360 degrees winding rotor. It would come to become the start of automatic wristwatches, which is now the norm for mechanical watches today. Today, Rolex called it the Oyster Perpetual. Number 6. Rolex has its own foundry. Rolex is a company that does things a lot differently from its competitors. Rolex calls this the Rolex way. This includes having its own foundry where the company makes all of its gold for its watches. This makes Rolex the only watch company to make its own gold and have its own in-house foundry. Number 5. Rolex was given the lowest environmental rating as latecomers/non-transparent by WWF. WWF, aka the Worldwide Fund for Nature, released a report where they gave environmental ratings for watch manufacturers and jewelers in Switzerland. In this report, Rolex was given the lowest environmental rating as latecomers/non-transparent. The motivation was that Rolex as a company is not transparent in where it sources its materials, nor does not address the impact of its manufacturing activities on the environment and climate change. Number 4. HansWilsdorf offered to replace watches that had been confiscated from Royal Air Force pilots when captured. Some Royal Air Force pilots bought Rolex watches as they deemed them superior to the standard-issued timepieces. The catch was that if the pilots were captured and sent to prisoner of war (POW) camps, their watches were confiscated. Wilsdorf found out about this and offered to replace all watches that had been confiscated. He did not require payment until the end of the war. This also showed that Wilsdorf was confident that the Allies would win the war. Number 3. Rolex has 4 different factories. All of these factories are situated in Switzerland. The 4 factories are Plan-les-Ouates, Les Acacias, Chainbourg, and Bienne, where Rolex movements are made. Each factory handles different parts of the manufacturing process. Number 2. All Rolex watches are COSC certified. Control OFFI Seal Swiste Chronometre, COSC, is an independent testing institute which was established in 1973 to test the precision of Swiss-made movements. To ensure great accuracy, Rolex has all of its watches tested by COSC. And finally, number 1 on our list is: almost every single part in Rolex's watches are made in-house. Unless for a few small exceptions, Rolex makes every single part for its watches in-house. Rolex wants full control over the manufacturing process, and by taking everything in-house allows Rolex to get just that. As you saw from this video, Rolex has an amazing history behind it. There's a reason why it remains the number 1 timepiece brand in the world. We hope you found this video fascinating. Don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.